This will basically be a welcome back to most of you. Today we already talked about the patch notes changes to the new adjustments for various guards. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the Dev Insight part, the Dev Q&A, where they answered various questions about Season 7 that also partially address things that are in the patch notes and partially address some other things that were already mentioned. And with that, let's get right into it. The first question was if we're going to see any UI improvement. They said is this going to be a priority thing, or it is a priority thing, but they're currently focused on quality of the UI, also visually, and bug fixes. Currently, they're still working on the keyboard and mouse features, making sure that's running 100% smoothly because there were a lot of issues with that. And the item builder is also going to be fixed in patch 7.1. They also announced a hype UI thing that is returning in patch 7.2 that was requested by the community. They did not say what it was. I am not sure which UI thing that was gone is highly requested, but well, something is coming back that is apparently really cool. Then the next question was what the decision was for which items actually got percentage pen, and the items that they chose were the ones that they wanted to get out of a niche that were just kind of stuck there and just not really picked much, like Staff of Murden, for example. And they also wanted you to be forced to choose specific items if you want to go for high percentage pen. They will have different options depending on what type of mage you're playing, and that was very important to them, that you choose different pen items for different mages, like lifesteal mages take something else, for example. And they originally considered these changes nerfs, but many seem to think that the changes are actually buffs. So there was maybe a bit of a miscommunication there, a different perception. And they also briefly addressed Spear of the Magus, and there in that context, I think it's going to be very interesting in context of the Freya buffs. So it's not directly from it, but for Freya nerf, Freya got a nerf at the start, and I think a lot of people were a bit surprised about that one. And apparently Freya is going to be one of the few guards that really uses Spear of the Magus as good as you can, because the problem for most other mages is that it is still a nerfed item because it does more damage with a dot than everything else afterwards still does less damage than before because you don't have the protection reduction applied anymore. That's a less of an issue for Freya, who has two abilities that kind of work with it very, very well. The next one is Tyrannical Playtime. We already saw the nerf. So the reason why they introduced it so strong was they wanted a minion buffing item, and it ended up being too efficient. It already got nerfs, but they said when they release new items, they have to be really attractive to be picked up at all. So it helps when they're more popular because that makes the items easier to balance. And if they don't do that, then people might not even pick them up at all, and then it's going to be kind of hard to balance them. The next one was actually a question from me, more or less. It wasn't even really a question. I didn't send in a question, but I made a post saying that I was surprised that quite a few things were not nerfed on the PTS. Yamoja was also mentioned there. That's not in here, but they have mentioned that now that they keep a close eye on her. But the things that I mentioned were Warrior's Blessing, Ethereal Staff, Transcendence, Heartseeker, Relic Dagger, and Anti-Heal in general. So they said that if a character that this item is for is already nerfed heavily in other regards, then they want to sometimes keep certain anchor points consistent for them, even if they're considered stronger items, just so not everything collapses for them at once. They also don't want to over adjust, of course, and they want to have as many guards as possible in the meta, and sometimes these items facilitate having more guards in the meta. They are, however, open to changes in upcoming patches for all of these items, so all of these items are on their radar as well. The reason they gave for Warrior's Blessing was that basically a lot of things changed for solo already in terms of resource management. You have the totem that's nerfed, the Glad Shield nerf, and the blue buff nerf, or changed. So they didn't want to nerf that too. I personally would say that I think Warrior's Blessing should be prioritized in terms of nerfs over blue buff, and blue buff should be buffed again, so that solo lane doesn't just force certain picks due to the way that blue buff works, and rather just have more flexibility in the starting builds. That's my perspective though. Ethereal Staff came in very late in the last season, and it may be affected by the changes to Warlock Staff, because Warlock Staff might be popular and they might be competing for the same slot, so they kind of want to wait that out a little bit. With Transcendence, they didn't want to nerf it because they didn't want to nerf Hunter viability more. I personally think that Hunters might opt more towards Soul Eater anyways. My take on Transcendence, why I thought it would be nerfed, is because of Assassins. And that's where Heartseeker also comes in, so Heartseeker and Transcendence both. They said, well, those are the items from a perspective of junglers here that help them, those are the top end items for them, and that also helped them in late game. And they wanted to take down just one of them first, and the Hydra's Lament was the most prominent one for them, which surprises me. I thought Heartseeker was a bit more prominent, but well, and they want to see how junglers work on the new map in general without taking away the normal late game item being Heartseeker. Fair enough. I think Erendite is also more attractive anyways. I still think that in the long run it's likely that Heartseeker is going to see a bit of a nerf. Relic Dagger, an item that I think is extremely strong. It's always picked on supports in the SPL, but it hasn't really caught on yet on the casual level. It's very, very strong, and Harris recognizes that, but many players outside of those who follow the meta closely or follow the SPL aren't picking up this item. And they don't want to nerf supports at the start of the season either, so they kind of stay away from nerfing support items right away. In other words, build Relic Dagger as long as it's still good, because it's an extremely good item and Harris is aware that it's an extremely good item. And right now they're not nerfing it yet, but they might do that sooner or later when people pick it up more. So use it while you can. And anti-heal, last but not least, my take there was specifically on Divine Rune and Brawlers, which I think are just a bit too potent for the stats they offer, but not a major big deal anyways. And they said that healers don't feel too strong at the moment, but they are performing well statistically. So Ajax personally disagreed with the take that anti-heal needs any changes. And Pompon said it depends a lot on the player level, the player variant. Because anti-heal is not as popular on lower levels of play, and only really on higher levels. There are a lot of changes that affect healers indirectly though, so they'll see how those play out and then adjust accordingly. And then there are Hunter questions, because some people ask if Hunters are useless now and why Hunters are getting nerfs. Keep in mind that these are partially reverted already, or not fully reverted actually. So Hunter nerfs were there to offset mage nerfs, but it showed that Hunters didn't really need those nerfs. What they wanted to avoid was people just not picking mages because of the pen changes, and instead just picking multiple Hunters because they are the only ones that counter tanks. And they are still open to the idea of splitting pen on physical items the same way as they did it for mages at a later point. This would be a few patches down the road though. They're going to see how it goes for the mages first, and then it could still be considered if that happens for physicals as well. I personally think it would be interesting. I think Titan's Bane is really boring, and I think it would be interesting to see some items in like assassin item pools as well with percentage pen instead. But we'll see. The new Gels map, some people were complaining about it being too big. They said they made it so big so that they can put more stuff into it, more objectives, more to do. It's still smaller than the old classic Gels map, and they did not want to make it feel too much like Assault, because currently it's a lot about this one lane where everything happens. Though I gotta say, the new map still does that a lot, but yeah, we'll see. There was a question if there would be a physical Lotus crown, because we also have a physical Word of Asclepius, so to speak now. Ajax said he had never thought about that, but the goal isn't to make a physical counterpart for every item in the game, or magical counterpart. They will, however, keep that in mind and maybe consider in the future. They were asking somebody was asking if there are any surprise guards that are not in the trailer, and there is at least one more guard that is not in the trailer at the end of the season. They also said something about the guard rising above them all, and they said the warrior rising above them all. So what's very likely based on that is that Mulan is going to be a warrior. I'm going to talk about Mulan and other data mining more very soon, but it seems that, yeah, based on that, unless he very much misworded that, it's pretty much confirmed that Mulan is going to be a warrior. The 2020 season pass that some of you are probably aware of, that will come with a limited Zeus skin and limited recolors and the player title. I actually misunderstood that. I thought it was going to be 1,000 gems, but it's not. It is going to be $40, but you get 1,000 gems when you buy it, and those other skins. It also, again, they didn't mention the voice packs again, so I'm guessing you're not getting those. You're also getting the normal recolors, and you do not get a discount if you own the God pack. In my opinion, that does not make it worth it for anyone owning the God pack, and even for those who own who don't own the God pack, you might just buy the God pack for cheaper instead. I don't know. I don't know how much the God pack is right now. I thought it was cheaper. Last time I checked, it was, especially because they frequently have discounts for that anyways. But if you're really after this limited recolors, then that would be for you. Maybe those look really cool. I don't know. Maybe they're like special recolors that have a special effect, kind of like, legendary diamond type of skins. And there's also a digital deluxe edition, which is $50, which is the God Pack plus the season pass. I don't know why you would buy both, but yeah, well, I guess it's just a discount on the God Pack afterwards. The question that always pops up again and again is if there will be a PTS on console. Hi-Rez is actively working on a PTS on console and trying out things in that regard. There are a few issues with it though. Console has a different certification process for patches, so every patch has to be certified first, which means it takes longer to deploy them. Therefore, the PTS would have to be separate from the PC PTS, and that creates a lot of extra work, and you can't play with people from PC either. And it's also something that, the argument that always gets brought up is other games have this, but other games that have that typically have a much slower update cycle, so they get like, I don't know, an update every half a year or so, and then it's a lot more feasible to do this. But in the context of that, they also acknowledged that the last patch was deployed very buggy, which I think is worth mentioning because, they mentioned it at least. And Mage's Blessing was asked if that was getting any buffs. They wanted to be careful with any further item changes, especially with the restored artifact change. Very understandable. That's probably going to be the new start, though. I think they will have to buff Mage's Blessing somehow if they want to make it more appealing to players. But yeah, they just want to take it a bit easy on the mage changes because there are so many coming up already. Same thing with Doomorb nerf. Ajax said that I might have listed that in my request as well. I did not. I would like to emphasize that. I don't think Doomorb needed a nerf at this point with all the other mage changes. And that's basically the perspective that they had here as well, saying, let's see if it's still useful with its current price and the lack of percentage pen, and because this might change the whole meta and might not make Doom Orb as interesting as an early game item. And I would like to add to that you also have to keep in mind that Spear of the Magus was usually bought with this. Sometimes there was Divine Ruin, but typically the combo was Doom Orb, CDR Boots, Spear of the Magus, so you can offset the lack of early pen. And with Spear of the Magus being nerfed, you no longer have the option to offset that in the same way. So there might still be the outlier one that takes Divine Ruin with it, but it might just not be as interesting for some. And Invade meta is also probably not going to exist in the same way. So I think Doom Orb is going to be in a different place. Warlock Staff. The question here was why it got such weird stat reductions along with the pen. And they tried earlier versions of Warlock Staff on PTS, and the item ended up being completely OP. And that is why they decided that instead they're going to nerf it down a little bit more before they launch it, so that it's not going to be played by everyone everywhere all the time. Also, mages generally are getting more farm now, so their whole position in general might change, and that is something that factors in with all these changes. Somebody asked if clans are getting more changes, more rewards. It sounds like that's very unlikely. So rewards are for people to be encouraged to join a clan in the first place, not to bribe them to stay in the clan consistently. They are still considering changes to clans, but changes to clans would also involve massive UI work, and that would prevent changes to the UI in other area, and I think most of us will agree that those areas are probably more important than clans for them. Loki actually got talked about again as well. So Loki is currently in the evaluation stage for a rework. That means they're looking at different things that could be possibly reworked without confirming the rework yet. And they're trying out different rework designs on paper first to see what they would feel like, how they could work together, and if they can find a middle ground where they're all happy with. They will still write the blog post in the future when they find an approach. Ajax said like roughly 1 or 2 months from now. And then, of course, before they actually go through with it, they want to have feedback for those changes as well, because there are some people that really love Loki in his current form still, so they have to appease them as well with every change, and they'll have to figure out how to make that work for everyone. The battle passes are just going to be the same as last year. It's going to be the same amount of battle passes throughout the year. People ask if there's going to be a solo queue only mode where you only play against other people that are solo queuing, and this is not intended because they don't want to split the player base anymore. They mentioned that in a few contexts also for other game modes and stuff as well. Another question that was coming up was if ranked crossplay will be a thing ever. And Ajax said the community has to decide that. He personally would very much like it because it would be good for the player pool of ranked itself, being all combined together. But the problem here is the community perception. They cannot really do that if then all the console players say, I would have won this game if it wasn't for playing against keyboard players. And some people will naturally drop down with this cross-play combination as well and may lose their prestigious rank. So yeah, it's really up to the community to voice that they want ranked crossplay badly and that they are okay with maybe taking some of the trade-offs with it if you want to see it introduced, because otherwise it's unlikely to happen. If another person asked if casuals with bans would ever be a thing, and again, that's unlikely because they don't want to split the player base. Another question was if there would be a chance to introduce an anti-heal hard cap. But they said in order to consider that, they're going to look at the impact of all the changes that they made first. There were some questions regarding jungle clear with the changed stats of the camps and Assassin's Blessing. Ajax said it's still pretty fast. It's not slowed down that much. So it's slowed down a little bit, but not that much. You also get to start a little bit earlier, and you also get a slightly more split XP bonus, so that can offset that a little bit as well. And then last but not least, they talked a little bit about Achilles. We saw that he got some nerfs now. There was a Reddit post about Radiant Glory, like overhauling the ability to force him more towards Assassin or Warrior, depending on how you play him. At the end of the day, they said that would not make him more interesting. It would make him a bit more plain to play in some ways. And they think that that's not the way to go, and they would rather take the approach that they're currently taking with these changes. And that is everything. That's the patch notes changes as well as the dev insight, quite a lot together. Very, very interesting stuff. I think there's some good changes in here, and it's good to hear about a lot of the stuff as well and know that it's being taken into consideration, that they're not overlooking like major item changes or something that might still happen at a later point, have to happen at a later point. So I'm very happy with that. And that is it for this summary. With that, thank you guys very much for watching. Feel free to give a sub button and maybe the bell if you're new to the channel, and if you want to stay updated for not only the new changes coming out, but also I'm going to make a video on some new strats, some new starts with the new season that are going to change a lot in terms of meta. I have a big video plan on that. I'm very, very happy to talk about that one. I figured something out. And yeah, and let's see you for the next one tomorrow or later. I might make my Olympian recommendations later still. DukeSloth out.